later on.
So if I steal your wallet, you're not going to look me in the face and say, you should not have stolen my wallet. Instead, you're going to understand Cliffe's biochemical reactions forced him to steal my wallet. Therefore, we have to alter Cliffe's biochemical reactions in order to alter his behavior. That's the key.
And the most effective way, especially with little kids, to alter their biochemical setup is to make them feel bad about things by saying, that wasn't very nice. That's the most effective way to alter their biochemical setup. I mean...
How does speaking to them alter their biochemical reaction?
Well, right now I'm speaking to you, and I'm very sure that you have all of this stuff going on in your brain right now as a result of my speech.
And guess what? I promise you, from the depths of my being, that right now I can be so disrespectful to you, it'd be embarrassing.
Oh,
or I can choose to be respectful.
Uh-huh.
And guess what? I'm convinced you can do the same. I'm convinced I don't have to be respectful of you, and you don't have to be respectful of me. And I don't have to be disrespectful of you, and you don't have to be disrespectful of me. And I can promise you, sir, two children growing up in the same family, with the same mom and dad, with the same environment, one graduates and becomes a murderer, and the other graduates and becomes a philanthropist. And if you think that a human being is just the sum total of their genetic makeup and the influences of their environment, then I got a story to tell you.
This conversation brings up a fascinating tension between materialist determinism and a perspective that insists on moral agency and accountability, specifically from Cliffe's angle. Cliffe's approach here is to challenge the idea that if everything, including human emotions and decisions, is biologically pre-programmed or a product of deterministic forces, meaningful concepts like personal responsibility, gratitude, and even love lose their grounding. The intense exchange about free will, determinism, and agency drives at whether we can hold anyone accountable if our actions are merely reactions, an issue critical in both ethics and legal philosophy.
So you're saying read this as a historical source, which is implicitly saying believe this stuff and then see whether or not you believe it. Of course, you know, if I'm assuming that I'm believing something, I'm going to believe it. I don't know if you're a Mormon or whatever, but there's modern historical accounts of some dude who found some gold plates, and they had all this extra information about, you know, that there were people in North America. You know, Jesus came to North America. Should I also treat those as a historical source? Why or why not?
You guys are raising a great issue, which is, how do you determine whether any document is historically accurate or not? I mean, certainly you know history is a legitimate form of knowledge, otherwise Ohio State is ripping you guys off by charging you money to take a history course, right? So you obviously know that history is a legitimate form of knowledge, but the excellent question you're asking is, how do you determine what's history and what's not? How do you determine what's fact versus what's fiction? You want to take a stab at it?
I mean, personally, I haven't taken any history classes here. I'm a mathematics PhD student, and I deal with truths which are uncontradictable. I mean, I only invest in knowledge which I know to be absolutely certain. And but I do think that history, if you look at a history book from 100 years ago, compiled from, you know, everyone's ideas of history from the last 3,000 years, it's going to be very different from a history book today. And all you can say is our current state of knowledge is that we think, you know, this is what probably happened. You can only say probably. You can never be sure.
All right, but wait a second, sir. Prove to me that yesterday you walked on this earth.
I don't believe I can.
Okay, good.
I think I might have
Then if you cannot prove to me that yesterday you walked on this earth, but you're convinced that yesterday you did walk on this earth, I would assume.
No.
You don't?
No, I think that it's very probable that this entire universe was created an instant ago with all of my memories in place. I mean...
Okay, good.
That's...
You're being consistent. I like that. You're right. Maybe a very intelligent scientist created you this morning in a big vat and put all the memories that you have in your brain in your head.
The chances are that I am an artificial intelligence. Probably I am just in a vat. I mean...
All right,
I don't...
fine. But are you able to live that out?
Yes, because...
Really? Then how do you treat your mom and dad?
So, for myself, whether or not I was created an instant ago or whether or not there are any other people who actually exist, I'm going to live my life in a way that makes me happy because I'm all for being happy. And for me, happiness is derived from treating other people, whether they're real or not, in a good way.
Do you treat your mom and dad in a different way than you treat other people, or no? Do you thank your mom and dad because they have sacrificed for you, or do you not?
I do.
Well, then why are you doing that if you're not sure that they really did sacrifice? Because they might be an illusion. Your memories are just illusions, remember?
Even if they were illusions, I'm not certain that they are. So I'm hedging, so I can hedge on the bet that they probably aren't illusions. Or I could just say to myself, I'm happier if I was all alone and everything else is an illusion, I would be happier living my life as if it were not. And so,
but if you're going to be consistent, you have to be an epistemological nihilist, which means you really don't know why you know anything. You don't know that you can know anything. Because if you think about it, if what you say is true, your rational mind is the result of the non-rational, the irrational. And so how can you be convinced that you know anything, even mathematical truth? How do you know? Charles Darwin wrote a letter to a man named Mr. Graham in 1883. And in this letter, Charles Darwin writes, in light of the fact that our minds are simply highly developed monkeys' minds, why do we trust our minds to tell us the truth about reality? Would you trust the thoughts of a monkey? I like that. The guy's being consistent with what he says he believes. So if you really believe that you were just created in a vat this morning, why on earth would you look into the face of your mom and dad and say, thank you for all the way you've loved me and sacrificed for me over the past 20 years?
Because even if I was only created instants ago, then I was created in such a way that I feel better about saying those things to my parents than just dissing them and like, screw you guys. So as a result, I do these things. I mean, I'm set up to say these kinds of things to my
Good.
parents.
Which means you're set up.
Yeah.
You don't have free will, do you?
I don't know what free will is.
You don't?
No.
All right. I go up to this woman, haul back, slap her in the face. What are you going to say to me?
I'll say that probably the fact that you were set up in this way and that the universe has orchestrated for you to do this
Good.
means that your neurons are wired up in such a way that you're likely to do this kind of thing again to other people and maybe even to me. And because you're wired in this way, then I, not wanting to be slapped myself, am going to be like, yo, whoa dude, I'm gonna call the police on you because I want you locked up because I don't want your crazy miswired brain to be acting itself out in the universe anymore.
Good. But you have to acknowledge, I'm not responsible for hitting her, as you pointed out so well. It's just my biochemical reaction that forced me to slap her, right?
Sure.
So there's no such thing as free will, which means you definitely wouldn't hold me responsible, would you, for slapping her?
I mean, I don't know who I would be holding. If there's no agent, if there's no person, then I don't know who I would be holding responsible.
That's right.
I'm going to put you in a jail only so that you don't repeat this to other people.
Right.
Later on.
So if I steal your wallet, you're not going to look me in the face and say, you should not have stolen my wallet. Instead, you're going to understand Cliffe's biochemical reactions forced him to steal my wallet. Therefore, we have to alter Cliffe's biochemical reactions in order to alter his behavior. That's the key.
And the most effective way, especially with little kids, to alter their biochemical setup is to make them feel bad about things by saying, that wasn't very nice. That's the most effective way to alter their biochemical setup. I mean,
how does speaking to them alter their biochemical reaction?
Well, right now I'm speaking to you, and I'm very sure that you have all of this stuff going on in your brain right now as a result of my speech.
And guess what? I promise you, from the depths of my being, that right now I can be so disrespectful to you, it'd be embarrassing.
Oh, I'm
or
sure.
I can choose to be respectful.
Uh-huh.
And guess what? I'm convinced you can do the same. I'm convinced I don't have to be respectful of you, and you don't have to be respectful of me. And I don't have to be disrespectful of you, and you don't have to be disrespectful of me. And I can promise you, sir, 2 children growing up in the same family, with the same mom and dad, with the same environment, one graduates and becomes a murderer, and the other graduates and becomes a philanthropist. And if you think that a human being is just the sum total of their genetic makeup and the influences of their environment, then I got a story to tell you.
Okay.
The man's name
But even though those
was Wilkes. And he was one of the greatest actors in the mid-1800s of Shakespeare. And Thomas Wilkes acted in New York City, and he acted in London, and he was praised. Then he comes back to the United States, and Thomas has two other brothers, John and Junius, who are both very talented actors. And they pull off Hamlet, and they pull off Julius Caesar. And it's fascinating that the brother John plays Brutus, because 1 year later, the brother of Thomas Wilkes, John Wilkes Booth, assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Thomas was so disheartened by the fact that his brother assassinated the President of the United States that he dropped acting. But one day in New Jersey, he was standing on a train platform, and a young man beside him suddenly slipped onto the tracks. And Thomas Wilkes leaned over, grabbed the guy, had his leg hooked around a pole, and pulled the young man out from the oncoming train. 2 weeks later, he got a letter from Ulysses S. Grant thanking him for saving the son of an American hero. That was the son of Abraham Lincoln, who Thomas pulled out of the train tracks. Thomas Wilkes carried that note from Ulysses S. Grant in his pocket till the day he died. Two brothers, same parents, same profession, acting. One assassinated Abraham Lincoln, the other saved Lincoln's son from getting run over by a train. Sir, for you to say that human beings are simply the result of their genetic makeup and their environment is an insufficient explanation of human behavior.
If human beings are able to somehow step outside of physics and make choices
Yes.
independent of physical reality and, just all these processes that are governed by the laws of physics, then can you tell me, so you should be able to make a decision just instantly. If you're presented with a situation, you decide one way or the other. So can you change midway? Say you're presented with a situation, how quickly can you make a decision about what to do? So, because if there's a finite length of time, so say it's 1 second, situation happens, in 1 second you're able to make a decision and then you act. Then, in between that 1 second, aren't you determined? Aren't you not able to change your course before you act? This guy goes to punch me, and I clock him before he gets to me. So in that second, I've made the decision. My fist is launched. There's no way for me to turn back. Where's my free will at that instant when I've made a decision or when I'm in the process of making a decision?
see that's
All right.
why
Good question.
Schopenhauer said
I was
that
speaking
you
at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and a student came walking down the path saying, "Oh man, here's another narrow-minded, conservative, fundamentalist Christian out here regurgitating his memorized Christian formulas." And I lit into the guy, all right? I told him, you are the most narrow-minded, bigot, judgmental rascal I've ever met. You haven't listened to me for 1 minute, and yet you're already drawing conclusions on who I am and what I'm saying. Well, the guy didn't keep walking. He sat down. But after about 3 minutes, after reflecting on how I talked with the guy, I had to turn to him and say, "Man, I am very, very sorry for the way I treated you. That was wrong for me to light into you in spite of the judgmental comments you let fly." And this Brown student said, "Well, thank you." And he respected me. Now, I didn't have to humble myself and ask him for forgiveness. I chose to. I don't have to ask forgiveness. Asking forgiveness means I made a wrong decision. Would you please forgive me for the wrong decision I made?
But it happens. So what I'm trying to get at is that if you partition time, so you take your whole lifespan and you break it into these incredibly small little units of time, I'm willing to bet that you aren't able to control your actions on that small a scale. And so on those small scales, it's going to be entirely you know, like the fact that my finger trembles a little bit is not due to a conscious decision. The fact that I'm starting to say something is really an unconscious mechanism because it takes place in these little time scales, and in each of these little time scales, I'm determined, and so pasting those together, I would say that my entire existence is determined. I mean, if you think about what you're saying, are you planning out all of the words that you're going to use as they're coming out of your mouth, or are they just streaming out? In my case, I just have diarrhea of the mouth right now. I'm not thinking about anything I'm saying.
You've got to be kidding me. You're not thinking about anything you're saying. You think that your articulate speech is coming out of that mouth by accident?
Pretty much.
Oh, give me a break.
Essentially, I'm not planning out
Come
each
on.
word in detail.
Come on, sir. You're a very intelligent man with a very rational mind. The words that you're putting together are not coming out by accident. I can promise you.
But
You got to be kidding me.
Think to yourself right now, are you planning in advance all of the words that you're saying and making sure that they're going to form themselves into grammatical English sentences, or are they just coming out essentially by, you know, the fact that you have some schematics that tell you how to produce English sentences, you've got some vague ideas, and it ends up generating these sentences which could be written down on a page?
Sir, I speak at MIT and I speak at some state university campuses, and I can promise you, sir, there is a big difference in the ability of a Harvard student and an MIT student to think, and the difference compared to a junior college student's ability to think. There is a humongous gulf. And if you think I'm going to buy your line that says, well, no, I just have diarrhea of the mouth and I just speak the way I do. Baloney, you're a PhD student in mathematics. And I can promise you, sir, I'm not going to be a PhD student in mathematics in the near future. That ain't an option for me. So you have a brilliant mathematical mind. You're getting a PhD here at Ohio State in mathematics. That's outstanding. But for you to try and act like that's some accident, come on, sir. Give me a break. You know better than that.
I mean, I wouldn't deny that I have these mental structures that are, you know, enable me to speak, whereas the mental structures of an ape do not allow the same. I mean, maybe they have more problems with vocal cords and these kinds of things. But the distinction is really that I have some pre-programmed algorithms that allow me to take vague ideas and translate them into coherent.
All right, fine. Let me ask you, if you've been dating her for 5 months and she has repeatedly says to you, I love you, and tonight your father calls you up and says, son, I've been paying her $1,000 a week to love you, how would you feel?
I'd feel pretty bad.
Pardon?
I'd feel pretty bad.
Feel pretty bad.
Yeah.
Why? You believe in the first place that there is no such thing as love as a free will. You think that everything is just a biochemical reaction. So if that's true what you say, why would you be disillusioned if you found out that your father was paying her $1,000 a week to date you?
Well, I think a rock is determined by its interactions with its environment, and I don't think a rock would be upset if, you know, someone told it the same thing. And I've been set up so it makes a lot of sense for me to be upset about something like that, because if human beings were not upset about that kind of thing, we wouldn't be reproducing very effectively. We would be reproducing willy-nilly, and there would be no support system for little babies because families wouldn't be gathering to tend to them. And we have very weak little babies that can't fend for themselves, and we would all die off as a species if we didn't care about those kinds of things. I'm a human being. I used to be a little baby. I had to survive somehow. My parents had to care for me and love each other for that to happen. And I exist today because of that. And I'm a member of this human species, which goes all the way back the same way. And evolution explains why I would have that kind of emotion.
Very well said.
Well, I'm real grateful that the legal system in the United States has nothing to do with your worldview. Because the legal system in the United States says that if I am walking around the library here, and if I see a little man with a balding hair, with a big stack of books under his arm, and if I haul back and hit the guy as hard as I can, when I am hauled into a court of law, if the judge says, hey, Cliff, why, when you were at Ohio State, when you walked around the library, did you haul back all of a sudden and hit that guy? And I say, well, Your Honor, you got to understand, when I was a little kid, my father abused me. And the way he abused me was he'd always take up a big book and hit me over the head, and he had a little bit of balding hair on the top of his head. So when I saw this professor at Ohio State, he so reminded me of my dad, I had no choice but to haul back and hit him. I'm very grateful that in our culture, in our society, the judge will look me in the face and say, Cliff, I'm very sorry that your dad abused you when you were a kid, but you are still responsible for the way you hit that Ohio State professor. Even though physically he reminded you of your dad, you have a free will. You did not have to hit him. I'm glad that the legal system in the United States is based on a biblical worldview, not an atheistic worldview, a materialistic, deterministic worldview.